I've been reflecting a lot on a lot of the comments that I receive on the various posts that I make, and people hate their HOAs. They hate the fines, they hate the rules, they hate the what feels like a police state. Everything about it, they just despise. What surprised me isn't that people hate their HOA, right? That's something that I think is kind of a well-known thing, that people just dislike their HOAs in general. But what really stood out to me was the terms they were using specifically about their HOA, about their HOA, right? These terms that they were using are things like you would expect to hear them talking about their political opponent, right? They're calling them communists, they're calling them fascists, they're calling, these Nazis. They say all these like really big negative terms to refer to something that it's literally their neighborhood that they're dealing with this. And I was reflecting on this the other day when I was mowing my neighbor's yard. My neighbor, they're aging, it's an aging couple, and just as an attempt to be a good neighbor, I just volunteer to kind of mow their lawn every week. And we sit on approximately 3/4 to an acre of land, and it's not a small little thing, right? It's not just let me quick go over there and do it for 10 or 15 minutes. It takes a good bit of time. And as I was mowing their lawn, I realized that if we had lived in a very strict HOA, that they would be fined left and right. I started thinking about the destruction of the HOAs, or how people, they talk about wanting to destroy HOAs, or somehow have policy that just completely demolishes the HOA. And and maybe I'll make another video about this, but it's not very practical. Like, I understand the sentiment that people have, but it's not very practical to dismantle the HOA. But it dawned on me as I was thinking about this, that there's a lot of similarities to what we're actually are experiencing on a federal, or some would even say on a global scale, as well as what's going on in a smaller community scale, right? And it's the distrust in systems. That's what it comes down to. There is an extreme distrust in all of the systems, and people want to dismantle the HOA in the same way that they want to dismantle parts of the federal government, or whatever, the political opponents that they see. And it made me think of this book that I've read a number of years ago. And I just want to paint a picture here of a few things, because I think that there's a lot of similarities that we can glean from. So I'm reading a synopsis of The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And it lays out the idea that history moves in roughly 80 to 100 year cycles, that roughly the length of a human life, and it's broken into 4 very distinct, what they call turnings. And these turnings last on average roughly 20, maybe 25 years. So an entire cycle might be 80 to 100 years long. And it lays out these 4 turnings. The first turning is the high, right? The high, and we'll talk about this. The second is the awakening. The third is the unraveling. And the fourth turning is what they call crisis. So what is the high? The high is when it's directly after a major crisis has ended. Think post-World War II in America. And the mood is this: society is confident, institutions are strong, and there's broad agreement about where the country is headed. People trust leaders and want to work together. Now, I don't know a whole lot of people that would say that we're currently in a high. And the traits are this: the traits are strong civic order, right? Rapid institution building, economic growth and stability, and less focus on individualism and more on community. And so the example that's given here is between 1946 and 1964 in the United States, and that's what you call the baby boomer era, the suburban growth, the GI Bill, and the interstate highways are being built. So a lot of people would describe that as a high in America. And the second turning is what they call the awakening, right? And this happens roughly 20 years after the high, when people start to feel constrained by all of the structure. And the mood is institutions are still strong, but there's growing discontent. People want more personal freedom, there's authenticity and a spiritual renewal, and the traits are what you would call cultural revolutions. There's a rejection of established norms, there's spiritual awakenings and countercultural movements, and Again, the examples they give are roughly the mid-60s to the early 1980s in the United States. Think of the civil rights movement, Vietnam protests, hippie counterculture, and women's liberation. And there was also a lot of spiritual revivals happening during that period of time. And the third turning is what they call the unraveling. And this is when, after the awakening, trust in institutions erode. And the mood is generally that society becomes more individualistic and fragmented, institutions weaken, personal freedoms and market choices are celebrated, and the traits are this. The traits are political polarization, weakening national unity, cynicism towards authority, and focus on personal success over collective good. And the examples they gave are the early 1980s through the 2000s in the United States. And that's where you have extreme deregulation, you have cultural wars, you have Wall Street boom, and you have increasing partisanship. I feel like what is described in the crisis is how people describe their neighborhoods. It's how they describe the homeowners associations that they live in. The cycle ends with a defining national or global emergency that forces society to rebuild from the ground up. Danger and urgency dominate. Survival depends on unity and sacrifice. Institutions are rebuilt to meet the challenge, right? And the traits are this: large-scale wars, economic collapse, or political upheaval. There's centralized authority and collective action. And there's a willingness to accept strong leadership to just get through it. And the examples they gave are the Great Depression and World War II, 1929 to 1946 roughly. And the authors of this book suggest that the United States has entered this current crisis roughly around 2008. Whether you say we're in a 20 or a 25-year cycle, you're going to think that we're either right in the middle of the worst crisis of our lifetime, or we're on the back end of it. But really what I want to examine is a lot of what we would describe as the crisis on a federal and global scale is exactly how people describe living in their HOA. And I think we have an opportunity, because whether you think we're in the middle of a crisis of our neighborhoods, the HOA, or you think we're on the back side of that, we have an opportunity to rebuild the institution of a neighborhood in the image that we want it to. We have the opportunity to not just sit on the sideline and critique it from afar and call it a fascist regime or call it a bunch of communists or whatever you want to do. Stop with the name calling and start actually entering into your neighborhood and looking at what the problems are, examining the problems, and figuring out how to solve them, right? Step into a solution. Don't just criticize from afar. And now, I'm not saying that the comments people have about their HOA are wrong. People's experiences, their perspective, all of that is legitimately theirs. So I'm not in any way suggesting that the HOA doesn't have a problem. What I'm suggesting is we have to be part of the solution. We can't just criticize it. Now, we might think that the federal government or the global elitists or whatever you want to call them are too far removed, that there's some entity that's out there, but we can't talk about our neighbors the same way we talk about these federal institutions that we disagree with. I want more and more people to adopt the attitude of, if you see a problem, mow your neighbor's lawn, right? Don't just criticize it and say, well, I hope they get fined, or, oh, shame on them, they can't keep up with it. Enter into the problem. Try to do something to solve the issue. I just wish that more people would adopt the idea of, how can we solve the problem? If it's something that involves your neighborhood, step into the problem, right? You don't have to criticize it and hate it and want to destroy the very institution. Again, I'm not discounting that people have thoughts about these things or perceptions or feelings about them. I think those are very real. But what I'm suggesting is maybe we can collectively actually redeem what is broken within the HOA system and figure out how to solve the problems. Maybe, just maybe, we can actually get to the place where we are experiencing a high in the neighborhoods, that we have made the turning away from the destruction and destroying and calling them all the names, and we can actually redeem that and create an environment that really thrives and the people that are involved actually have the best interest of the neighborhood in mind. Anyway, I want to know, do you feel like the institution of an HOA, the very concept of it, needs to be destroyed and completely gone away with? Or do you feel like we have opportunities to rebuild it in the community that we want it to be and create the neighborhood that actually solves the problems, not just criticizes it from afar? Anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts. Drop a comment down below and let me know, do you feel like the HOA just needs to be destroyed and completely demolished as an institution? Or do you feel like there is hope that we can solve these problems?